Watchmen, a graphic novel created in 1985 and later adapted to a motion comic and film, explores an alternate timeline in which masked heroes exist and are sanctioned by the government. Dr. John Osterman, also known as Dr. Manhattan, is an atomic particle physicist working in a private lab who, through an unfortunate lab accident, transformed into something other than human and subsequently gained supernatural abilities. This video essay explores Dr. Manhattan as a substitute for atomic power, both in the way that he was created and in his actions. He is a driving force for the plot across modalities of representation, playing a critical role in both global and personal relationships within the Watchmen universe. He also serves as a lens through which we view morality, ethics, and the nature of humanity, pushing the boundaries of right, wrong, and the idea of the greater good.
Watchmen is set in an era of burgeoning atomic power, with possibilities previously thought impossible laid out before humanity, such as infinite sustainable energy and devastating new weapons. In this universe, Dr. Manhattan serves as a literal personification of the power of the atom, sporting the hydrogen symbol upon his body and the ability to manipulate the structure of the universe to his will. His appearance marked the advancement of technology and unlocked unthought-of possibilities, but it also served as a tool for the more mundane relationships of the world. Osterman, being a United States citizen, found himself working with the government and, more importantly, as a representation of American ideology himself, serving also to deter the possibility of nuclear war with the Soviets that was on so many minds at the time. His influence embodied and spread the ideals of the American state, though it would become clearer in time that he himself held those ideologies in little regard. The contemporary representation of Dr. Manhattan in the film saw his character as a much more active plot agent than in the graphic novel. For example, in the film, the main conflict of the story had the world believing that the death of billions of people was in the hands of Dr. Manhattan, causing global leaders to unite in defense against this new threat, whereas the graphic novel saw Dr. Manhattan play a much more passive role, having nothing to do with the final conflict. In fact, his character had so little to do with the conflict, including failing to prevent the deaths of millions, that it is something to be remarked upon. Why does Dr. Manhattan, with his inconceivable abilities, fail to act to prevent so much destruction? Dr. Manhattan is an entity with powers that humanity cannot comprehend. He understands how things are put together fundamentally, and his view of time places him in a distinctly unique situation regarding how he grasps why and how events occur. Though they do not understand his powers or what he is, the United States government had no problem using him to their advantage, including ending the Vietnam War in their favor in the span of 2 weeks. What would he be without that power, though? Is the only difference between a freak and a hero of the nation his immense power and usefulness to the country? With his great power in mind and his initial cooperation with authority, people seem to forget the changes wrought by the accident as well. With his changed views of the world and time, so too did his views of morality and right or wrong change. This is most readily seen in his conversation with Laurie on Mars, during which he said,
"We're all puppets, Laurie. I'm just a puppet who can see the strings."
From his perspective, there is little point in changing the course of events, from the death of a pregnant woman to the aversion of the deaths of billions of people at the hands of Vite. Is his morality more or less right than ours? Does our view of morality color our view of Dr. Manhattan's actions? A major difference in plot between the film and graphic novel is seen in this topic. The graphic novel has, as mentioned previously, Dr. Manhattan playing a lesser role in the plot, instead having the monster of the story be spawned from the mind of a kidnapped artist and comic maker, to be unleashed on humanity as the precursor to a contrived alien threat. In the film, however, Dr. Manhattan is the scapegoat, with Vite shifting the blame for the death of a significant portion of the world's population to his hands. In both, this matters little to Manhattan, who chooses to leave the planet in search of another one. Consequently, is there merit in blaming Dr. Manhattan versus some otherworldly threat? Is there something to be said for the fact that the graphic novel's monster was a contrivance of human creativity? Rorschach, with his rigid black and white morality, died because he would rather die than live in a world where peace was purchased with the deaths of innocents. But the others chose to remain silent, and Dr. Manhattan had no judgment at all.
As Dr. Manhattan's story progresses, we see him slowly lose touch with his own humanity. But what exactly does humanity mean in this case? One facet of his humanity is emotion. Throughout both the comics and movie, Dr. Manhattan maintains a stoic visage, mostly devoid of emotion, showing only small glimpses into his thoughts. However, it can be seen that Osterman does have emotions. As Adrian Veidt, the universe's main antagonist, points out, one can see the subtle movements in Dr. Manhattan's face.
I've known John long enough to see he isn't devoid of emotion.
Veidt exploits this piece of humanity within Osterman as a weakness to further his own plot. Dr. Manhattan is more human than readily apparent. His emotions also show in his relationships. We see this in his relationship with Laurie many times, such as when he takes her to Mars to open her eyes to her life's true story. He confesses to her that she is his only tie to the human world, and without her there is no reason to remain or become involved in the affairs of humanity any further. We also see his past relationships come into play when he is manipulated into leaving Earth at a critical plot point, when Veidt is planning his final moves, because he is told that his involvement has given people he cares about terminal cancer. He has different priorities and a radically different view of the world, but his love and relationships tie him, even in the slightest ways, to Earth. Even at the conclusion of the story, when he has decided that his lack of ties to Earth is reason enough to move on to a world less complex than this one, he voices his desire to create life, representing his realization that life, especially human life, is as complex a phenomenon as any and is deserving of his respect. His steady departure from humanity is outwardly represented by his costume. In the graphic novel, Dr. Manhattan was originally given his full-body costume by the government. Throughout the course of the story, although this is not shown as clearly in the movie adaptation, Osterman sheds his costume, piece by piece, eventually opting to remain fully naked except for mandated appearances for the government. The costume can be shown to represent his ideological ties to both humanity and to the United States government. His lack of costume towards the end of the comic represents his almost complete disassociation with humanity and Earth. John's transition from humanity was jarring and sudden. Only after a significant amount of time had passed was what remained of his willpower able to form his body again. It is important when considering Dr. Manhattan as a character to discuss what he is. Is he still human? When comparing his form with humanity, we can see that he has a corporeal form, if one constructed and maintained mentally. Humanity is also consciousness, which it can be shown he has some form of. In fact, it can be said that his consciousness is potentially superior in some ways to conventional human consciousness. What marks him as different is his ability to understand and manipulate the structure of his surroundings and his unique view of temporality, which is shown in him being aware of the entirety of his timeline simultaneously. This is especially relevant because of the nature of his upbringing. John's father was a watchmaker, and from a young age, Osterman was fascinated by time and timekeeping. However, upon Einstein's discovery that time is relative, his father saw timekeeping as obsolete and forced John to pursue physics. John maintained his belief about the nature of things, that
now it's just a question of reassembling the components in the correct sequence,
as his father had said to him.
In terms of modalities, the perception of Dr. Manhattan is vastly different between the graphic novel and film. In the movie, he seems more human, whereas the comic makes him seem more detached from humanity. This is at least partially due to the nature of live-action film and the actors associated with the production. The motion comic likewise falls somewhere in between these two perceptions of portrayed humanity. This difference lies in the detail of the physical character and the subtle and continuous motion that is present in the film, but less so in the comic, as well as the rigid nature of the artist's drawing of Dr. Manhattan. These qualities help us naturally connect with Osterman as a human when watching the film, which is neither to be encouraged or avoided, but it is just a different perception of the characters. Perhaps this is why in the film, Osterman is framed by Veidt, as we are able to better connect on a personal level with one we see as more human, as opposed to the more otherworldly nature of the monster created in the graphic novel. Dr. Manhattan allowed a unique and important perspective on some of the issues that define the Cold War era and the circumstances surrounding the graphic novel itself, as well as being a character that lives outside of time, embodying humanity's desire to further itself despite its simultaneously destructive qualities. His is one of the many characters that provides a lens through which we can explore the social commentary of Watchmen, highlighting powerful issues at the time of writing that persist through the present day. The end.
In the end, nothing ends, Adrian. Nothing ever ends.
Oh, the time